My grandmother's diary revealed a family secret so big, it destroyed everything we thought we knew. I never thought I'd be one of those people posting some family drama on Reddit, but here I am. My grandmother passed away 3 months ago, and my family has been slowly going through her things. She lived in the same house for over 60 years, so you can imagine the amount of clutter: boxes stacked in the attic, old furniture covered with sheets, drawers filled with letters, photos, recipes, you name it. Everyone in my family wanted to keep something of hers. My mom took her jewelry box, my uncle wanted her antique china set, and my cousins fought over the old photo albums. I didn't ask for anything, until I found the diary. It wasn't in plain sight. I discovered it in the attic while helping my dad carry down old boxes for donation. It was tucked inside a locked wooden chest with yellowed newspaper clippings and a few brittle letters tied with twine. The diary itself was small, leather-bound, and worn smooth from decades of handling. It had no lock, but the edges were stiff, like it hadn't been opened in years. I told my family about it, but everyone shrugged. It's probably just her recipes or daily notes, my mom said. She was always scribbling something. Nobody seemed interested. So I kept it. At first, the entries were boring in the way you'd expect. Pages of recipes written out in careful handwriting, gardening notes about when she planted tulips, reminders about doctor's appointments, even complaints about neighbors. It felt like a time capsule more than anything else, a sweet little glimpse into her everyday life. The first time I felt like something was off was an entry from the summer of 1963. Most of her diary entries were neat and precise, but this one was messy, with words scratched out and rewritten. She had written, "He came again today. I told him it wasn't safe, that people will notice. But he insists. He says I belong to him, even though I'm married. God forgive me, I don't know how long I can keep this up." I froze when I read it. My grandmother, married to my grandfather at the time, with 2 children already, having an affair. I wanted to dismiss it. People write things in private they don't mean, right? But the tone, the desperation in her handwriting, made me pause. I kept flipping through, and the entries became sporadic. Some days she'd write about making blackberry jam, then slip in a line like, "He says soon it will all be ours." She never named him. Just he. It was chilling. Things got stranger the deeper I went. Halfway through the diary, I noticed something odd: 2 pages stuck together. I carefully teased them apart and realized they had been glued at the edges, almost like she didn't want anyone to find what was inside. Hidden between them was another piece of paper. Not a normal diary page. A loose sheet, folded over and over until it was the size of a playing card. The paper was thin, almost fragile, and written in rushed handwriting completely unlike her usual neat style. I unfolded it slowly, and what I read made my stomach drop. The baby is not his. The baby is his. If anyone finds out, it will destroy everything. That was it. No name. No date. Just that. I sat there for a long time, staring at it. Which baby? She had 3 kids. My mom, my uncle, and my aunt. All of them grew up believing they were the biological children of my grandfather. If what I just read was true, one of them wasn't. I wanted so badly to believe it wasn't real. Maybe she was writing a story. Maybe it was just some what-if scenario. But the tone didn't feel like fiction. It felt like panic. I didn't tell anyone at first. I slid the paper back into the diary and hid it in my backpack. But it gnawed at me. Every family dinner, I'd look around the table and wonder, who wasn't who they thought they were? Did my grandfather know? Was this some long-buried scandal my grandmother thought would never come out? And then another thought crept in, one that I couldn't shake. My grandmother always had a complicated relationship with my uncle. She was distant with him, almost cold, while she doted endlessly on my mom and aunt. Growing up, we always joked that she just didn't like boys as much. But now, with this diary in my hands, I couldn't stop wondering if that distance wasn't just personality. What if it was guilt? I couldn't sleep after finding that note. I kept replaying the words in my head over and over. The baby is not his. The baby is his. It was like they burned themselves into the back of my eyelids every time I closed them. I'd wake up in a sweat, convinced that somehow everyone already knew what I had found, that my mom or my uncle or my aunt would corner me and demand to see the diary. For a week I carried it with me everywhere. In my backpack to work, in the car when I ran errands, even to bed at night. I don't know what I thought I was protecting it from, but the idea of leaving it alone felt impossible. Finally, I decided I had to know more. One scrap of paper wasn't enough. If I was going to drive myself insane with possibilities, I needed answers. So I went back to the diary. Most of the entries around the time of the loose page were mundane again, but the handwriting looked strained. A little shakier, as if she was nervous when she wrote. I read entries about canning peaches, about my mom learning how to ride a bike, about neighbors borrowing sugar, and then suddenly, in between all that, she'd write things like, "He won't stop calling," or "I had to tell him no again. If Harold finds out, everything will be over." Harold was my grandfather. I stared at that line for a long time, like maybe if I blinked enough it would change. She never wrote his name often, but this time she had. There it was. He was in the dark. I kept reading. Weeks passed in her handwriting. She wrote about my mom's birthday party, about making dresses, about headaches. Then another entry, I see his eyes every time I look at the child. I don't know how much longer I can pretend. Lord forgive me. The child. Which one? It was killing me not knowing. My mom was the oldest, then my uncle, then my aunt. Any of them could have been the baby she was talking about. But the way she worded it made me think it was either my uncle or my aunt, because by then my mom would have already been a few years old. I wanted to confront someone, but who do you even go to with something like this? Hey mom, did you know one of you and your siblings might not actually be grandpa's kid? That felt like throwing a bomb into the middle of the living room and walking away. So instead I tried to be subtle. At the next family gathering, I paid close attention to the way people looked. I thought maybe I'd see something obvious, some difference I hadn't noticed before. But my mom, my uncle, and my aunt all looked like family. Same noses, same dark hair, same strong jawlines. If there was a difference, it wasn't the kind of thing you could spot at a glance. But I couldn't shake the feeling about my uncle. My grandmother had always been harsher with him, quicker to criticize, slower to praise. He used to laugh it off, say that's just how mom is, but now I kept wondering if deep down he'd always felt it too. The breaking point came when I noticed something in the box I'd originally found the diary in. There were letters in that chest too, and I hadn't bothered reading them before. Most were just old Christmas cards or notes between friends. But tucked into one envelope without a stamp was a folded page, yellowed with age, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. It was from a man. The letter said, I saw you with him again today. It cuts me to pieces knowing he gets to walk beside you in the daylight while I have to wait for the shadows. You promised me that would change. You promised me we would be together. Do not make me a fool, Margaret. Margaret? My grandmother. There was no signature. No name. Just that. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the letter, but when I finally looked up, I realized my hands were shaking. I put it together in my head like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The affair, the note about the baby, the letter from some unknown man. This wasn't just a fling. This was a whole other relationship that my grandmother had hidden from everyone. And somewhere in the middle of it, a child had been born. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. The weight of it was crushing me. I thought about throwing the diary and letters back in the chest and pretending I never saw them, but I knew I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So I decided to tell my mom. I picked the night carefully. We were sitting in her kitchen after dinner, just the two of us. She was sipping tea, flipping through a magazine, and I could feel my heart trying to pound its way out of my chest. I started small, asking her what she remembered about Grandma when she was young, if she ever seemed secretive. My mom laughed and said, she was a closed book, but that's just how people were back then. That's when I told her about the diary. Not everything. Not yet. Just that I had found it and there were things written inside. She looked at me with curiosity at first, but when I told her about the note the baby is not his. The baby is his, her face changed. She went pale, like I'd sucked the blood right out of her. She asked to see it. I gave her the diary, my hands practically trembling as I handed it over. She read the note, then the surrounding entries, then the letter I'd found. Her hands shook just like mine had. When she finally looked up at me, her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. She said, we can't tell anyone. Not yet. When my mom said, we can't tell anyone, I thought she meant we should take some time to think, maybe talk it through together before deciding what to do. But days passed, then weeks, and she refused to bring it up again. If I asked about it, she'd shut me down. Drop it, she'd say. It was a different time. She probably didn't even mean what she wrote. But I could tell she didn't believe that. She looked at me too quickly, her tone too sharp. It started eating at me again. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was protecting someone. Maybe herself. Maybe her siblings. Maybe even the memory of my grandmother. But the silence was unbearable. I don't know what exactly pushed me over the edge, but one night I took the diary to my aunt's house. I hadn't planned it, I just got in the car with it sitting in the passenger seat, and before I knew it I was knocking on her door. She welcomed me in with her usual warmth, but when I pulled the diary out of my bag and laid it on her coffee table, her face went serious fast. She started reading, frowning deeper with each page. Then she got to the folded note, and her hand flew to her mouth. She sat back on the couch like the wind had been knocked out of her. This can't be real, she whispered. I told her I thought it was. I told her about the letter from the unknown man, how the timelines matched up, how the entries hinted at guilt and secrets. She sat there for a long time, silent, before finally saying, you know what this means, don't you? I nodded, but hearing her say it out loud still hit hard. One of us isn't who we think we are. My aunt was the one who broke. She said she had always felt like something was off. She remembered fights between Grandma and Grandpa when she was a kid, moments that didn't make sense back then but suddenly did now. She told me she always wondered why Grandpa seemed more affectionate with my mom than with her or my uncle. And then, almost like she couldn't stop herself, she said, what if it's me? I didn't know what to say. Watching her face crumble under the weight of that possibility was one of the hardest things I've ever seen. I thought maybe she'd want to keep it private, like my mom did. But instead, she said, we need to tell your uncle. And we need to tell your cousins. Secrets like this, They don't stay buried. They rot everything. The next weekend, she invited everyone over under the guise of a casual family dinner. I was sick with nerves, but she insisted. When the meal was over and we were all sitting around the table, she cleared her throat and said there was something we needed to talk about. My mom immediately stiffened, shooting me a warning look. My uncle just looked confused. My aunt pulled out the diary. The room went dead silent as she read passages out loud. The ones about him, the ones about pretending, the folded note about the baby. My cousin stared with wide eyes. My uncle's hands curled into fists. When she finished, no one spoke at first. Then my uncle exploded. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. This is bullshit. Lies. She was old. She probably made half of it up. But his voice cracked when he said it. My mom jumped in, telling my aunt she never should have shared it, that dredging up the past would only hurt people. The two of them started shouting at each other, accusing one another of wanting to destroy the family. Meanwhile, my uncle got up and stormed out of the room, his face red. His wife followed, and I could hear them fighting in the hallway. My cousins sat frozen in their seats, whispering to each other. It was chaos. When things finally calmed down enough to talk, the conversation turned to the obvious: who was the baby? My mom insisted it couldn't be her. My aunt was convinced it might be her. My uncle refused to engage at all, which only made everyone else suspicious. By the end of the night, we weren't a family anymore. We were three camps: my mom, who wanted to bury it, my aunt, who wanted answers, and my uncle, who looked like he'd rather disappear than confront the truth. A few days later, I got a text from my cousin, my uncle's oldest son. It said, "We're ordering DNA tests. We need to know." That was the moment I realized there was no going back. I thought maybe this would bring clarity, but all it did was tear the wound open wider. My mom refused to participate. My aunt agreed immediately. My uncle said no, but his kids went behind his back anyway. I didn't know where I fit in. I wasn't directly involved, but I had lit the match that started the fire. And then the results came back. The DNA results didn't just confirm our worst fears. They shattered everything. My cousin called me first, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him. "It's not Dad," he kept saying. "It's not Dad." I thought he meant the test had revealed he wasn't biologically related to his father, that my uncle wasn't his dad after all. But it was worse than that. The test showed that my uncle himself wasn't my grandfather's son. The secret baby was him. My grandmother had carried that lie her whole life. She'd raised him in the same house, let him call my grandfather Dad, let him grow up believing he was just like his sisters. But all along, he was the result of her affair with the man in those letters. When the truth hit, it hit hard. My uncle stopped talking to everyone. He left the family group chat, blocked numbers, even skipped Thanksgiving for the first time in his life. My cousins were furious at him at first, not because of what he was, but because he refused to talk about it. It wasn't his fault, but he treated it like a shameful secret. Meanwhile, my mom doubled down on denial. She insisted the test must be wrong, that DNA sites weren't reliable, that my grandmother would never betray Grandpa like that. But I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew. She just couldn't accept it. My aunt, though, she took it differently. She became obsessed. She started digging into old records, pulling marriage certificates, hospital files, even trying to track down who the other man might have been. I begged her to stop, but she wouldn't. She said if the truth was out, then it had to be all the way out. One night she called me, her voice tight with excitement. She'd found him. The man. He was long dead by then, but she found his name in a stack of yearbooks and employment rosters. He'd lived 2 streets over from my grandmother back in the 60s. He worked in construction. He was married, with kids of his own. And the kicker? His children were still alive, still living in the area. I didn't want to know more. But she did. She reached out to them. And suddenly the secret wasn't just ours anymore. Within weeks, everything blew up. My uncle's kids found out they had half-siblings they'd never met. My aunt told them it was a blessing, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as a betrayal, a humiliation dragged out into the open for strangers to gawk at. Then came the fights. My cousin screamed at my aunt for telling people outside the family. My mom screamed at me for starting this by showing the diary in the first place. And my uncle, he showed up at my door one night, drunk, eyes red, and told me I'd ruined his life. I wanted to argue that none of this was my fault, that the real blame lay with my grandmother for hiding it all. But looking at him, broken and angry, I couldn't say anything. I just let him vent, let him call me every name he could think of, let him cry in my driveway until his wife came to pick him up. After that night, I stopped hearing from him. I haven't spoken to him in months. The fallout spread in ways I couldn't have imagined. My mom and aunt don't talk anymore. My cousins barely acknowledge each other. Family holidays are gone. My grandfather, long dead, feels like a ghost haunting all of us now, a man who lived and died not knowing the truth about his own son. And me? I sit with the diary every so often, flipping through the pages like maybe I'll find something new, something I missed. But it always ends the same: her neat handwriting, her careful words, her prayers for forgiveness written in faded ink. The last entry I ever found was dated just a few weeks before she died. It wasn't about food, or the garden, or the neighbors. It was about him, the man who wasn't my grandfather. She wrote, I pray the truth never comes out. It would destroy them. It would destroy everything. She was right. Because that's exactly what happened. Sometimes I wish I'd left the diary in the box, never opened it, never read those words. Maybe we'd still be a family. Maybe ignorance really is bliss. But every time I think that, I also think about my uncle, the look on his face when he realized his whole life had been a lie. And I know that secret would have eaten him alive, whether we spoke it out loud or not. So maybe there was never a right choice. Just the illusion of one. All I know is this: my grandmother's diary didn't just reveal the truth. It cursed us with it.